I want to know how much fun you are having scheming for the new kickoff rules.
Having a blast. We're really excited about it. It's totally new for everybody, and just cool to see what different ideas people have, and being able to take what we know from the old world of kickoff and kick return, and see what's still true, what's not true, and it's just a fun process as you go, just trying different things, and then realizing, hey, this might not be what we thought, and it's organized trial and error.
So how long do you think it's going to take before everybody kind of figures out what truly works and doesn't work around the league, not just with you guys?
It's tough to say. I mean, honestly, it'll probably be in the regular season. People will play your games, and then everyone's going to be eagerly turning on film of everybody else to see what are they doing, what different ideas have people had, what works, what doesn't work. And so I think you'll see probably for 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, pretty rapid changes. And anyone that has an advantage early will probably be able to keep that advantage for a little while until people catch up.
Where have you gone or who have you talked to trying to gather ideas at this point?
We have great people in this building, and there's other people that we've spoke to, but rather keep that to ourselves for now. But no, there's it's a new setup. There's new parameters. The spacing is different, but it's still football. And there's a lot of things you can talk about with the play about what's different. And one of the things that we've talked about in this building is, instead of focusing on what's different, let's focus on what stayed the same. And the block destruction, the awareness of how far am I from the ball, what decisions should I make as a coverage guy. The same fundamentals in the return game of great feet, great hand placement, great eyes, leverage. All those things are still true. So, it's easy to get carried away in what's different, but we think that you'll be able to make a lot of hay just understanding and banking on the things that have stayed the same.
Is there a bigger unknown, like with how the kickoff team is going to handle it, or the return team?
I would say there's probably more unknown about the return teams. Just because there's a little bit of a question of exactly who's going to be able to get to who from a blocking perspective with the horizontal constraints that you have. How far will one individual player be able to get to and execute a block? I think kickoff-wise, people have a decent sense of what that is going to look like.
Would that be a lot of like squid type kicks? Would you expect to see some of those?
I think so. I think that's the general consensus is you're really you're not rewarded for hang time anymore. So any ball that can hit, it kind of creates artificial hang time if it can hit the ground and the action's going to start. So I think that the rules are incentivizing that type of behavior. So I would imagine that that's what you'll get.
As a special teams coordinator, overall, do you like the change just in that it makes the kickoff more relevant again in a league where for the last few years it's been kind of a non-play?
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it's really cool. We're pumped about it. It's anything that's more football, and we're going to be for it. And there's so many great people, coaches and players that have made a great living on fourth down and in the special teams phase. So for that segment of the game and the people that love that part of the game, it's exciting. There's more opportunity to show what you can do, to separate yourself, and to make an impact on the outcome of the contest.
Do you think it'll change the skill set of the players that you want involved on each side at all?
We've thought about that a lot. I mean, there's good conversation about it. I would say that if you had to maybe make a generalization of what trend will you see, you've taken away the bulk of the running of the play, right? So maybe the player that now becomes more available that wasn't would be the guy that just didn't quite have the ideal top end speed before, but has the arm length and the physicality and the decision making as a defensive player. I think that guy could become more relevant now. Maybe you see more tight ends, more pass rushers, bigger bodies. I think you will see some more D linemen on the field. In that sense, it's a great thing because you now have more flexibility within the roster for guys to be able to get involved. And then the other aspect, even though it's not necessarily the body type, but you might just end up seeing more players that are starters or fringe starters that, maybe didn't, you didn't want to have them out there on the field before, and having rep after rep of getting to, 20, 21, 22 miles an hour. Well, now it's a little bit different play, and it's not probably quite as taxing. So I think you you just could see a little bit of shift of who's available for the play in that sense as well.
From what you understand of the roles now, how varied do you think the approaches can be that teams will try out in these areas, and how wildly different from team to team could the way teams approach it look?
And are you speaking about the coverage sense, or
Any aspect of the kickoff plays?
and the question is how much variation can there be?
They can be within the rules that you're reading into.
That's a good question. I think you'll see some people that will push the envelope and get a little crazier than others, and see what you can do. I think there'll be other people that start more vanilla and test the waters. As with most things, I think that you'll see a kind of things even out with something that's, in time when we all become more familiar with it, where it's generally somewhat predictable just of what you're going to see. Similar as offense and defense. There's not, after years of you guys watching football, there's not that many times where you see something and you're like, man, what in the world is that? Every now and then you see a trend. There'll be a point in time where this play will become like that. I'm not sure exactly when that'll be, but I think it's a matter of time.
Some have said it puts more pressure on the kicker in a potential tackling role, and some have even talked about replacing their kicker with a different guy on the field that's more apt to be able to tackle in that play. Is that something that you think you might see throughout the league, and something you guys are considering at all?
Yeah, certainly considering it. The numbers would suggest that the kickers will make more tackles just because there's going to be more returns, and there's some numbers that would say that with this style of play that they're more apt to be involved in a tackle. As for the an alternative position player subbing in for them, you could see it. It's a little. If a guy can do it, then it's gonna have a chance to be really good. But you got to be pretty good to be able to kick off a bunch of times and keep the ball in the landing zone every time, because it's a fairly steep price if you miss it. And it'll be interesting to see. I think some guys, you'll see some people do it, and then I think eventually those guys will hit the ball because it's not quite as easy as it looks to do, and especially if you're trying to get really, really creative and barely get into the landing zone, that kind of thing. I mean, it's a very small margin of error, right? So there's certainly a risk reward with anything that you do.
How much have you looked at the UFL as a resource to maybe data or film or strategy?
Yeah, we looked at it quite a bit, the XFL stuff from last year, and just because it's the closest thing that we have to compare to, and when you do look at it, the spacing of the play is different, which you guys know. We're 5 yards further back, and then the restraints of where the return team can align are different. And the funny thing is, because it's such a small space, even just the 5 yards, it's pretty tough to compare. Like, there's certain things where you're like, okay, I could see this working, I couldn't see this working, but every clip you watch, you end up saying, okay, well, if I added 5 yards here, would this be the same? I don't know. And so there's an element that's a little bit unknown there. And I guess what I'm saying is that, it seems like it's the exact same. It's pretty different, but still valuable to look at.
And the returners themselves and kind of the value of having multiple guys who are going to be able to do that's obviously kind of a bigger deal, right? Having several guys who can really maybe take it to the house or whatever every time.
Every time would be nice. I would love that. So there's going to be more plays, right? So the reps and the wear and tear of it. Yeah, you're going to want to have more guys available to you that can do it. I guess you'd probably need a little bit more depth than in the past. But I think if you're just talking about that position, yeah, you're going to need a couple guys that can, are viable with the ball in their hand, just because it's going to be. I think with the style of kicks that you're going to see, it could be fairly difficult for one guy to be able to get to, all the kicks in terms of where the kicker is going to be putting the ball and the incentives we talked about earlier for the kickoff team to get the ball on the ground. So I think maybe you'll see more teams having two guys that are deemed a quality kick returner back there. I think that will be maybe a trend that is a little different than the last couple of years, where one guy is just strictly a blocker.
Is it safe to say you're going to have more multiple combination blocking schemes for kick returns than you've ever had in your
I'm not sure. That's a good question. I would say if I was forced to answer, I would say no, just because I've never dealt with constraints like this personally, and then no one in the league has. The where you can align is pretty, there's just major restrictions to it, and so what that does to you is it just with hey, I'm only allowed to align in this area if I'm in the setup zone on the 35. I'm a left tackle, as we would call it, and I have to be outside the numbers on the 35. Well, there's only so many guys I'm going to be able to get to in that split second once that play starts. And so I think some of that at different positions is going to restrict how creative you can be. Obviously, you can still be creative, but there's just in the old world, you would have 30 yards to be able to run and move and be able to get to different people. Well, now, I mean, the ball's kicked. I'm waiting. We start, and I turn and run, and then it's like a second later, and the guy that I'm supposed to be blocking is breathing down my neck. You know what I mean? So I think that part of it will limit, some of the things that people will try.
What kind of vouching did you do for A.J. Barner before the draft?
Just answered questions about him when they asked of what kind of guy he is and the worker and the day in and day out mentality that he had. And he's a guy that just from what I've observed around here and what Mike's vision is for the program and John, he's a guy that is definitely in line with those things.
That first preseason game going to be fun one.
Who's that one against? No, that's gonna be cool. That's funny that worked out that way, and what a neat way to start the season. Be super excited for that.
One more on the kick stuff. Is it going to be more important to kind of do this in the preseason? I mean, typically maybe starting guys aren't on special teams a whole lot in the preseason because you don't want to get hurt or whatever. But is it going to be more imperative to try to get real snaps out of a lot of those guys in this to test that out?
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I'm not quite there yet, just planning wise, but you certainly would want to make sure that guys have real competitive reps in a preseason setting before they get to the regular season. And the other thing that is relevant to all these questions about the kickoff kick return is these players are so smart and they're so experienced and they have such great body awareness, and especially some of the older guys that have been around special teams a lot. They're tremendous resources for us. So as we experiment, try things, implement techniques and plays, and we run them, they're really, really great for us as sounding boards. Hey, what do you think about this? Do you think this is possible? Some of the feedback that they've given us is great, and that will only increase as we get further down the road.
On the idea of possibly using like a non-kicker in a kickoff situation, have you tried that out yet? Like to see who could potentially do it?
We've talked to some guys. I don't know that we necessarily have an obvious candidate there, and we have a couple pretty talented guys in the specialist room to begin with. So we'll see. Again, like I said, I think that doing that is exciting, but it's to be able to do it over and over and over and not miss the landing zone is not quite as easy as people would think. So I think it's a great idea, and if you have a guy that can do it, it makes a lot of sense. But there's also then the downside of, that player now has a very unnatural movement that puts a ton of strain on your body, and adding that to his workload on top of being, running back or a defensive back or whatever it might be. So, that player has to handle that workload too. So it's interesting. It's all fun conversations, and there's a lot of smart people in this league and really talented players, and it'll be fun to see how it shakes out.
As we've talked to the offensive and defensive coaches, they've told us they're incrementally installing their 20% or 50%. Where are you with your special teams? Maybe the kickoff play aside, where are you installing your special teams system at this point?
In terms of a percentage?
Yeah, are you not even halfway there? Or you got a long way to go? Or are you mostly?
I haven't thought about it necessarily on a percentage basis. I would say that we've essentially installed just about everything technique-wise, and in the special teams world, that's a little bit probably more the typical mode you're in the off-season is working fundamentals, techniques, things that can be applied on different phases, or something that applies for punt and punt return or kickoff and punt. And so we've majored in that type of thing. And it goes back to the kickoff conversation. Like, yeah, there's a lot of things that are different with this play, but there's also, a huge chunk, probably more things that are actually the same than are different in terms of finding the ball, leverage on the ball, my hands as a defender, getting hands on blockers, knowing when I can win with speed, when I need to go through the blocker and not around it. So we're trying to make sure that we live in that world as much as we can this time of year, build a really solid foundation for the schemes that will be implemented later in the fall.
Anything else? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.